Welcome to the Real Lost Boss podcast.
Hello, welcome to episode 36 of the Real Lost Boss podcast. Going to continue a little bit of a trend with this episode. So if you've watched or listened to episode 35, I talked about weight loss injections. So I'm going to talk about another weight loss stroke dieting method. And this one seems to be dominating things at the moment, and that is the carnivore diet. So yes, this episode is the carnivore diet craze. Obviously, with my job, I get a lot of health, weight loss, fitness content going through the algorithms of my social media. And yeah, at the moment, wow, the carnivore diet is through the roof. And it is a fad diet. It will come and go, but it seems to be a really popular one at the moment. So I thought I would put my 2 pence worth in and talk to you about it, just in case you have heard about it, you're not quite sure what it is, or you are possibly thinking of giving it a whirl. Okay, so what is the carnivore diet? It is basically a very extreme version of the ketogenic diet. So when I always get this wrong, but when I started the name of it wrong, I can never remember whether it's Atkins or Adkins. But anyway, when I started my weight loss journey in February 2014, the Adkins or Atkins diet was absolutely through the roof. It was the current fad at the time. Carbs are the enemy and all this badger. Anyway, that seems to have kind of fizzled out over the years and has just sort of merged into what is known as the ketogenic diet. And the ketogenic diet is basically where we don't eat carbohydrates. We have 3 macronutrients that we consume. One is proteins, one is fats, and one is carbs. And whatever we eat is made up of 1, 2, or all 3 of those things. And basically, yeah, the ketogenic diet is we don't eat carbohydrates, we just eat proteins and fats. And the theory behind that is it puts the body into something that's called ketosis, where basically the body kind of combines proteins and fats to create its own version of carbohydrates because we're not giving it carbohydrates, and that in turn ramps up fat burning and causes amazing weight loss. It's all a load of nonsense, by the way. Maybe I'll do another podcast actually on the ketogenic diet, but the carnivore diet is basically an extreme version of that because it is zero carbs. So even with the ketogenic diet, it can be quite what you would class as very low carb. So people might consume 20, 30, sometimes up to 50 grams of carbohydrates a day, which is still very, very low compared to what the average consumption of carbohydrates is daily. But with the carnivore diet, it is, 0 carbs. And it is mainly the consumption of meat, seafood, and some dairy products. Strict carnivore dieters will just eat meat, seafood, and eggs. Though I've seen lots of different variations of it and loads of people that push the boundaries with it, like all sorts of crazy, weird, wonderful diets, as it were. So, I do see people that eat a lot of butter, cheese, yogurt on the carnivore diet. They class that as carnivorous. Is that the right word? Anyway, I do see other people as well pushing the boundaries a little bit. They'll still have coffee and stuff like that. But anyway, strictly carnivore is just meat, seafood, and eggs. Yeah, I don't actually know where to start. I've got a lot to cover with it. But basically, what's the theories behind it? Let's start off with that. What are the theories behind it? Well, the theories are that we kind of go back to eating the way early man used to eat. And the claims behind this is, in this day and age, it's currently 2024 as I'm recording this, obviously there's a lot of health issues in the world, and those health issues are mainly caused by ultra processed foods. This is the theories of the carnivore dieters. A massive increase of consumption of ultra processed foods, and I'm not saying that doesn't cause some health issues. I generally am not. And the increase of things like sugars, and overall the increase in carbohydrates that we consume, and basically we should be eating the way our ancestors ate, early man, the ancestral diet, where there apparently wasn't any health issues. So yeah, that's kind of the theory behind it. Again, we could delve into about a million different tangents with that theory. You know, the fact that early man's lifespan was 20 to 25 years of age, and it's now 80 years of age. And don't get me wrong, you know, obviously we live longer nowadays because of the advancements of technology and the way we live our lifestyles and this, that, and the other. But, you know, anyway, we still need to look at the data a little bit. And there's nothing to say, you know, there's no research to say that early man didn't have a lot of health issues, but there's kind of no real data to back it up. There weren't computers back then. There weren't, you know, books everywhere where people were documenting things. And really, again, you know, the carnivore diet is basically, or the benefits of it are based on pseudoscience, right? You know, lots of crazy health claims that it's the most nutritious diet to eat, it's the healthiest diet to eat. If you eat this diet, all your ailments will disappear. I've seen people that promote the carnivore diet that claim it cures cancer, that claim it can stop type 1 diabetes, that claim it will cure things like Crohn's disease. And yeah, it's pseudoscience. Pseudoscience is basically false claims around certain things with absolutely zero evidence to back it up. And that is one common trend of people that promote the carnivore diet. They'll come out with all these, again, crazy claims of how beneficial it is, but there is never any clear fact or scientific evidence to back up what they are saying. You might get the odd article produced by some scientist at some random university somewhere, but that is not the data we should be looking at when we're looking at certain, you know, health benefits of things. We should be looking at peer-reviewed, systematic, controlled, randomized human studies. That is what we should be looking at. That is the only place we should be taking the data from. And, you know, if we actually look back at early man, what do you class as early man, you know? I class early man basically about 10,000, correct me if I'm wrong, but farming practices started to come about around about 10,000 BC. So, and that obviously changed the dynamic of the way we eat. So I class early man, or the way we would eat like early man, anything from 10,000 BC to 3 million BC or whatever it was, when sort of dinosaurs were roaming the earth and whatever. So obviously things will change through different periods of that. But if we look back at 10,000, 15,000 BC, our diet was made up of things like plants, leaves, roots, flowers, insects, fruits, seeds, bark, and meat. We had a very varied diet. In fact, the diet that early man used to eat is pretty much identical to what chimpanzees eat nowadays. So we did consume carbohydrates 10, 15, 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. Did we consume ultra processed foods? Absolutely not. But, you know, again, the claim that you should eat carnivore because carbs are bad for us. Carbs are a blanket term. Carbohydrates does not just mean bread, pizza, French fries, things like that. Carbohydrates covers fruits, it covers veggies, it covers whole grains, it covers pulses, lentils, beans. Yes, it also covers sugars. It would also cover, your breads, your pastas, and things like that. Again, another claim that carbs are bad for us. Two of the healthiest nations in the world, and this is the kind of, the comparison I always make. Two of the healthiest nations in the world. One's Italy and one's Japan. And both of those nations consume a lot of carbohydrates, right? Japan's one of the, if you look at population density, is one of the largest consumers of white rice. And Italy's one of the largest consumers of pasta in the world. And they both are very, very healthy. Anyway, that might be another one, the Mediterranean diet. We might do that in a future podcast. So anyway, there are ridiculous health claims around the carnivore diet, and there is zero evidence to back it up at the moment. If the carnivore diet hangs around, will there be evidence in the future? Of course there will, because people will be doing studies on it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are studies now, that debunk a lot of their claims, which I'll go into a little bit further on into the podcast. So I do get asked about the carnivore diet all the time. I get asked about all sorts of weight loss methods all the time, and I think that's why I'm kind of doing these little mini series, as it were. Like I say, last podcast we talked about weight loss injections, and over the next few podcasts, I think I'm going to sort of target a few of the more popular diets out there, and just again, give my views on them, and I'll sort of pick ones that I get asked about. I do a lot of social media lives, and that's when people can come on and interact with me. And every day I pretty much do a live other than Sundays, and every day I will get asked, what do you think of this diet? What do you think of that diet? And again, the carnivore diet is a very, very popular one. So I do some content on it. And I've done, some content recently on it. And two things I always get as a bit of a backlash, as a bit of a retaliation from people that support the carnivore diet, is around weight loss. And the other one is around how they are currently feeling doing the carnivore diet. So let's tackle weight loss with the carnivore diet. So a lot of people, they'll jump on, comment, or come on one of my lives, or comment on one of my posts. Well, I've been doing the carnivore diet for 2 months and I've lost 3 stone. Okay. First of all, weight loss, we know, well, you should know if you've listened to or watched most of my podcasts, or you interact with me quite a lot. You should know that weight loss or continuous fat loss is caused by one thing and one thing only, and that is consuming less calories than you burn. Now, if you do the carnivore diet, you have a diet high in saturated fat, and fat is calorific. So how do people that have a diet high in saturated fat lose weight on the carnivore diet? They are still in a calorie deficit. And people that do the carnivore diet will actually be in quite a big calorie deficit. Why, if they're producing a lot of if they're consuming a lot of saturated fat? Well, number one, the biggest macronutrient that we consume is carbohydrates. Most people's diets are made up of about 60 to 65% carbs as it stands at the moment. And that is a lot less than what we used to eat. We do consume a lot more protein and fat nowadays than we used to, 40, 50, 60 years ago. But 65% is still a large amount. So if you're currently consuming 3,000 calories a day and you pretty much cut out, one of your biggest macronutrients, your biggest calorie intakes, that is your biggest calorie intake, you're going to over half your calorie intake. So you might have been consuming 3,000 calories a day, eating proteins, fats and carbs. I've cut all my carbs out. You're now eating 1,500 calories a day. Now, don't get me wrong. Are you going to replace some of those carbohydrate calories with some extra proteins and fats? Yes, but not loads. And I'll tell you why. Protein and fat together, well, not protein and fat together, sorry. Protein is always going to be your main macronutrient when you go onto the carnivore diet. So it's going to be the biggest macronutrient intake. And protein is satiating. It's very, very filling. A lot of people say fat is very, very filling as well. But again, there's very little evidence to back that up. But protein is, it's filling, right? So if you're consuming a lot of something that's going to fill you up, then you're not going to be consuming loads and loads of calories, even if what you are eating could be quite calorific. Number two, protein and fat isn't that appealing to eat. It isn't without carbohydrates. You get gammon and eggs. I love gammon eggs. I love gammon, egg and chips a lot more. I love a cheeseburger. I love it a lot more when it's between two slices of bread or a bun rather than just on a plate. So yeah, fat and protein just isn't really that appealing. So you don't want to consume loads of it. So it will massively reduce your want for food. It will. And that in turn is probably going to lead to most people being in quite a strict calorie deficit. And as you go further in, you will get bored quite quickly. Things will become not very appetizing, quite soon into your carnivore diet, and that will reduce your calorie intake even further. And, if you're in a pretty decent calorie deficit, you are going to lose a pretty decent amount of weight. Also, if we do a diet that doesn't contain any carbohydrates, carbs stored in the body as glycogen in our cells hold water. So when we eat carbs, it raises our blood sugars. Those blood sugars are then transported into our cells, our skeletal muscle, our brain and our liver, and it's converted into what we call glycogen, and that is energy, right, that we use. 1 gram of glycogen contains 3 to 4 grams of water. If you have no glycogen in your system, that will massively reduce the amount of stored water you have in your system. So anyone that's doing even the ketogenic diet, but certainly with the carnivore diet, if you've done that for a month, you are going to lose a large amount of weight. You're going to see those scales plummet. But the majority of it, certainly for the first 3 to 4 weeks, is going to be a loss of water retention. Your average water retention, which we all have in our body because we need to store water to survive, will drop right down, and that will reflect on the scales. And we can get that starting any weight loss method, but certainly with a keto diet or carnivore, which is an extreme keto diet, that is going to plummet. And then combine that with being in quite a strict calorie deficit, you're going to see some big changes. Certainly short term, you're going to see some big losses on the scale. So you've got to take with a massive pinch of salt people that are making these claims that weight loss is just amazing in the carnivore diet. Yes, you will lose a lot of weight, but the reason isn't because you're losing tons and tons of fat. You will be losing a decent amount of fat because you are in quite a restrictive calorie deficit. But certainly in the short term, so if someone comes, I've lost, 20 pounds in 3 weeks, the majority of that will be water retention. The other wild claims I get about the carnivore diet is around feelings. I get so many people commenting, I've been in the carnivore diet for 2 months now and it's the best I've ever felt. Okay, first of all, we can't base the health benefits of a diet on the way we feel. All right, loads of people after a few drinks in the pub will claim to feel amazing, but it doesn't mean that to feel amazing we should be consuming a lot of alcohol. Why do people claim that doing something like the carnivore diet for 2 to 3 months makes them feel amazing? Well, number one, if you go from a very poor diet even to something like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, you are improving your diet. And this is where a lot of people jump from. A lot of people will go from a diet that's high in ultra processed foods, consuming a lot of takeaways, consuming a lot of convenience foods, out the freezer, things like that. They've probably come from consuming alcohol on a regular basis, going out every weekend, getting drunk, getting on it. And then when they start this carnivore diet, because I'm not saying you can't drink alcohol on it, but it's kind of regarded that you wouldn't drink alcohol on it. Though I do follow one person that does the carnivore diet that seems to drink a lot of tequila. Anyway, that's another story. Maybe it's the carnivore diet driving him to the drink, I don't know. Yeah, generally people that would start this diet would cut out the booze, they'd cut out all the ultra processed foods, and although the carnivore diet is not the healthiest diet by any means, it's certainly going to be better than what you were eating. Yeah, and so that's going to make you feel better. My reply to these people is, that's great, crack on with the carnivore diet and now add some whole grains in and some fruits and veggies and see how you thrive on it even more, right? Add a bit more balance to your diet. Another thing about these claims is it quite, believable that people could just lie? Of course it is. Especially the people that are selling carnivore diet plans. There's one lad that springs to my mind on social media, and he sells his own carnivore diet plans, he sells his own carnivore diet cookbooks, he sells carnivore crisps, he sells carnivore bars, and of course he's going to say he just feels amazing on it because it suits his narrative. He's not going to go, hi, buy my carnivore plan, buy my carnivore cookbook, buy my carnivore crisps, buy my carnivore bars, but I feel rubbish. It's just not going to work, isn't it? So unfortunately, people lie about the way they're feeling. And number two, if you go from a terrible diet to just improving your diet, and like I say, for the rights or wrongs of it, if you go from eating a lot of ultra processed foods, consuming a lot of alcohol, things like that, to just consuming meat, seafood and eggs, yeah, you are going to feel better. Probably a lot better, if I'm being honest with you. Okay, so what are the main issues with the carnivore diet? What are the reasons why we should be very wary of it? Number one, health. So again, all these people doing the carnivore diet claim it has some amazing health benefits, and from it'll cure your arthritis. I've already said this, cures your arthritis, to, like I say, I've seen some people claim it cures cancer, you can cure your type 1 diabetes, you can cure your Crohn's disease. It doesn't do any of that, by the way. Long-term studies show diets high in saturated fat are extremely unhealthy for us. Now, I'm not saying saturated fat does not have some nutritional benefits, right? So saturated fat does contain things like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. But you can get those vitamins from other sources. You do not need to be consuming a lot of saturated fat to get that nutrition. Diets high in saturated fat, the science tells us that, it is very detrimental to our health, certainly our cardiovascular health. I've had two family members. One was my grandpa and one was my mum. And my grandpa had massive heart issues. He had angina, had mild heart attacks, and at 82 years of age needed a quadruple heart. I think it was 82 or 84, I can't quite remember. It was quite old, he lived a good life by the time he had it, but he had a quadruple heart bypass. And when I look back at my grandpa, he did have a diet high in saturated fat. Last September, now my grandpa's not with us anymore. If he had been with us now, I think he'd be well over 100 years of age. So he's not with us anymore, God bless him. But my mum, who is still with us thankfully, last September had a heart attack. 77 years of age, needed a stent in her artery. And when I look back at my mum's diet, she does have a diet high in saturated fats. And that will be a big contributing factor. And if you consume, if you do the carnivore diet, you are going to be consuming a lot of saturated fat. And again, these people that promote it, they're cooking the fattiest cuts of meat, 20% fat mince, which they claim is the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. It isn't. Ribeye steaks, and they're frying them in tons of, beef dripping or ghee, and then they're pouring that over. Or again, the lad I said before that's promoting all these, plans and carnivore bars and crisps, he pours the fat out the pan and dips his meat in it and eats it. It's absolutely rank. It really, really is, right? And diets high in saturated fat increases our LDL cholesterol. That's our dangerous cholesterol. That can cause plaques to build up in the arteries, and yeah, it's going to lead to some pretty major heart issues further down the line. It can take a while. So again, these people that I've been doing it for 2 months, right, and I feel great. Cardiovascular disease does not care about how you feel, and it does take time to build it up. And pretty much every medical association in the world, this is another thing with the carnivore diet, well, with a lot of people that promote these crazy things, is they feel like the world's against them. There's conspiracies that it's, the food industry wants you to be fat, the government wants you to be fat, the NHS wants you to be fat, it's big pharmacies, because if you weren't ill, all this medication, it's just, they're like flat earthers. It's honestly painful. At the end of the day, yeah, the food industry wants you to buy their food. I'm not saying that. But to claim that the NHS want us to be unhealthy and overweight because they need to then spend tons of money every year buying. We don't have private healthcare in the UK. Well, we do, but in America, that argument, I think it's a load of nonsense, might have a little bit of validity, because at the end of the day, yeah, it will be a big business. In the UK, most of the healthcare provided is from taxpayers' money, the NHS, right? So it's nothing to do, and you think the NHS does want to be scrimping and scraping around trying to pay for things because they want us to be sick so they can buy. It's just absolute tin foil hat, flat earth nonsense. Yeah, diet's high in saturated fat, which is pretty much promoted by every medical institution in the world, is going to lead to long-term cardiovascular disease, and it's also going to increase things like risks of cancers and stuff like that. Argue with it all you want, but those are the facts. That is the data that we have, and that isn't from just made up, plucked out of thin air from some random guy in a university deciding to write an article for a bit of clout. That is proper published medical studies. Yeah, that's it. Other health issues with the carnivore diet is deficiencies. If you're, I just said there are certain vitamins and minerals in saturated fat. Not minerals, really. Well, there is, I suppose, minerals in there, but there's certain, vitamins in there. But, I said what? Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. What about all the other vitamins that are out there? What about vitamin C, that stops us getting things like scurvy? You ain't consuming any of that stuff. Likewise, you're not consuming any fibre. And fibre, again, I see a lot of carnivore people dismiss the requirement of fibre. Trust me, it is required for a healthy gut. So yeah, lots of health issues. But the main one is this overconsumption of saturated fat. And this theory that saturated fat is the most healthiest thing we can consume is absolute bonkers. Other issues with the carnivore diet: cost. It is flipping expensive. Right? It is flipping expensive because, again, a lot of these people that promote it are like, you need to have grass-fed meat, the best quality free-range eggs, line-caught tuna, or, fresh salmon, not farm salmon and all this, that and the other. It's like, can we have a bit of a reality check, please? In recent years, some people, unfortunately, have had to choose between eating and eating, and you're trying to tell people that their healthiest way to eat is a diet that, for most people, is going to cost them £15 to £20 a day. And their response to that is, if you prioritize your money right, you can afford it. Well, how about I put my whole family onto carnivore? So mum, dad, 2 kids, £15, £20 a day. I love my local butchers. The quality of the meat is sensational, and I shop there as much as I can. But a good sized sirloin steak is 10 quid, right? And some of these guys are having 2 of these a day. That's £20. Plus, half a dozen to a dozen eggs, plus they use the most expensive fats, so on and so forth. 20 quid a day could be conservative, but for 4 people, that's £80 a day. Let's times that by 7. Now we're at over £500. We're talking thousands of pounds a month to eat like this. It's just not reality for a lot of people. And there's no need to eat like that for most people. Well, no need for anyone to eat like that. Okay. And the last issue with it is longevity, as always with any fad diet. Certainly around weight loss. I've got to look at it from a weight loss standpoint because that's what I am, a weight loss coach. And as I always say, long-term problem needs a long-term solution. And for most people, they're not going to stick to it. They're not going to stick to it very long because, again, cost might become a factor. Flexibility is going to become a factor. There's certain diets out there, and whether you should take this into account or not, but I think you should, they're unsociable. They are unsociable. And this is where we get tested, right? So, you've got your best mate's birthday and it's at a lovely Italian and you're doing carnivore. Now, I'm not saying you can't just go and have, just prawns for your lunch, for your starter, and then just have a steak and leave all the sides off for your main. But come on. I mean, really, who wants to eat like that? And, should you base your entire diet on how sociable it is? No. Should you egg? But it has to be a contributing factor. And that's one with a lot of fad diets. Same with like intermittent fasting. We'll leave that for another podcast. That'll be coming up soon. But yeah, longevity, certainly for weight loss, you are going to crash and burn on the carnivore diet. Most people, will there be anomalies out there that, I've done it for 35 years, Neil? Yeah, great. There's always going to be people like that. But for most people, the majority of people, it's going to be too restrictive, it's not going to be sustainable, and you're going to crash and burn way before you get anywhere near your weight loss goal. All these kind of issues, in a way, are backed up by a chap called Paul Saladino. Now, I don't agree with this guy. He's an absolute buffoon, if I'm being honest with you. But, and what I'm about to tell you now kind of backs up that he's a complete buffoon. But buffoon, for anyone that doesn't know what is a buffoon, I have no idea. Anyway, he's a bit of a prat. Everyone knows, or a Burke. I love that word. He's a complete Burke. I'll leave it as that one. Anyway, Dr. Paul Saladino became a millionaire from writing a book called The Carnivore Code. And he did carnivore for 2 years, and he used the old, I'm a doctor, listen to me, I'm right. And we should eat the way our ancestors used to eat, even though, like I've already said, our ancestors used to eat flowers and bark and insects, which I'm not about to start chomping into anytime soon, by the way. And he wrote this book and he promoted it like mad, and he got millions of social media followers, and he sold loads of these books, and he became a multimillionaire from it. And after 2 years went, this carnivore diet, this book I've been promoting, this way I've been telling you to eat. Well, what it's actually done for me over the last 2 years is it's absolutely plummeted my testosterone levels. It has given me really terrible sleep patterns. It's given me heart palpitations and muscle cramps. So yeah, I'm actually not going to do it anymore. Thanks for buying my book. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for following my advice and, taking it that it's gospel because I keep telling you I'm a doctor. But yeah, it's absolutely a load of nonsense. I'm not going to refund you, by the way. I'm going to retire. I think he lives in Costa Rica now with my millions of pounds. But cheers anyway. Anyway, there you go. All right. Is it all bad? Should we finish on a bit of positivity? I like to be positive. Is it all bad? No, it's not all bad. Does it have a place? Yes, like some other crazy fad diets do have a place. And the place of the carnivore diet is actually an elimination diet. And there's nothing wrong with elimination diets because they are done very short term. They're not designed to be a permanent change to your body. And what an elimination diet is, basically, we reduce what we eat if you've got issues. So if you suffer with a lot of bloating, a lot of cramping, maybe things like diarrhea, constantly, you know, there's a chance you've got some allergies or, you know, different issues with the way you can digest certain foods, or different foods have different reactions to the body, because we have to accept that, you know. Some people say, you know, when I eat bread I get very bloated, or when I do this, you know, I don't feel great. Fine, you need to learn from that. There's trends there. But the carnivore diet can be a great elimination diet. And what I mean by that is basically, yeah, eat your meat, eat your seafood, eat your eggs, or just eat meat and eggs, right? Because those are two things that, you know, people shouldn't really have any major reactions to. Obviously, if you do, then reduce it even further. Just eat meat. I'm not telling you to do this long term, by the way, just in case people are like, oh, I'll just eat meat for, you know. But yeah, basically, it's elimination diet. So you reduce to just a couple of different things. So maybe just eating steak and eggs for 2 weeks. Let everything get out of your system. And then you start to introduce a couple of things back in. So you might eat steak and eggs. And then you're going to introduce potatoes and, I don't know, yogurt, right? Do you still feel all right? Do you have any adverse reactions to it? Or, you know, no, as soon as I eat potatoes, I get stomach cramps, or as soon as I have yogurt or milk or whatever, right? But if you introduce a couple of things, everything's good, then introduce another couple of things. And then, you know, anything that doesn't make you feel great when you, right, I'm not going to eat that, or I'm certainly not going to make it part of my regular diet. So it does have a place doing something like that. But again, a lot of these people on social media are promoting this as a permanent change. This is the way you're going to eat for the rest of your life. This is the way we should be eating. This is the most healthiest way to eat. This is the way to cure any issues you might have. And yeah, that's the issue. All right. Doing it as an elimination diet for a couple of weeks and then slowly introducing foods back in to see how your body reacts is absolutely fine, because a lot of you might have done like an intolerance test, right? And when you get these intolerance tests, and you've got to take intolerance tests with a massive pinch of salt, because they don't come back with any context. So, for example, you might do an intolerance test, and this intolerance test comes back and says you're allergic to honey, eggs, tea, whatever, you know, a load of different things, right? But it doesn't sort of say you're intolerant to this at a certain level. It will just pick foods out. So let's say you are intolerant to lactose, which a lot of people are, but you might only be intolerant to lactose at this level, at a certain level. So if you have a splash of milk in your cup of tea, right, probably no issues whatsoever, because you're only consuming a small amount of lactose. Lactose, by the way, is the naturally occurring sugars in dairy. You're only consuming a small amount of lactose into your system. If you then have a great big huge bowl of cereal, you know, you put 38 Weetabix in a bowl and put 3 pints of milk on and eat all that, and next thing, and you run into the toilet because you've got stomach cramps and it's coming out as soon as it's gone in, then yeah, obviously, you know, if you consume that much lactose in one hit, that's where your intolerance is. So, and that's the same with anything. You know, you might be intolerant to a certain type of amino acid or something like that that's present in eggs, but you'd have to eat 500 eggs for it to even trigger your intolerances, if that kind of makes sense. So sometimes, I'm not saying they should be not used in certain ways, intolerance tests, but they can be very, very hit and miss. You know, I've had one done before in the past, and half the things it said I'm intolerant to, I eat on a day-to-day basis. Honey, mine come up and said I'm intolerant to honey, and I eat honey probably nearly every day. But, you know, I mean, am I intolerant to something in honey, whether I have, you know, 10, 15 grams, which is what I normally have, or I'm intolerant to honey when I have 100 grams? Well, I never eat 100 grams of honey in one hit. Does that kind of make sense? As always, the poison or devil is in the dose. So like I say, the carnivore diet might have its place as an elimination diet, where you take a lot of pretty much everything you eat out and then reintroduce little things back in and see how the body reacts. But as a long-term weight loss method or as a long-term diet change to improve any health issues you might have, I would definitely leave it alone. There you go. That's my thoughts on the carnivore diet. Long term, it's not healthy, it's not good, and it's not something that I feel. In fact, if I'm being totally honest with you, just to finish off, I think it's really dangerous to be promoted the way it's being promoted. All right, that's it. Let me know in the comments if you agree, if you have your own thoughts on it. Like I say, that's just my 2 pence worth, and I hope you find some of it, maybe a bit relatable or interesting or, educational, as it were. Right, I'm waffling now, as I normally do. I'm off, and until next time, whatever you are listening to me or watching me on, make sure you boss your weight loss.